Now that we have our 19 by 11 inch paper created, it is time for us to start working on our rough draft of our landscape. Now you can work from a photo reference. You can create your landscape from your imagination, or you can combine some photo references or just use them for ideas. So I have about 3 different landscapes that appealed to me when I was searching for ideas. Now for your landscapes, you are going to need a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. Your background is going to consist of sky and the land features furthest away from us. Your middle ground will consist of some other layers of land features, like here we have a mountain range and it's overlapped by a hill, which then has also a body of water in the middle ground. And then you will want a foreground, and we want a foreground that, similar to this image, comes to the bottom of our landscape design. We're going to layer our landscapes so that we have at least 3 land feature areas within the middle ground and background, and then one final layer which will be our foreground, which will be in the front and center lowest part of our landscape drawing. So looking at my photo references, I'm going to determine how much sky I want to show. Now, in drawing landscapes, the higher up you draw something on the paper, the further away it is going to read. The lower you draw something on the paper, the closer it will appear. So I'm going to start, and I'm just going to sketch out a possible mountain range. From the left to right side. And again, I'm just sketching. It's an idea. It's not concrete yet. It's just a plan. Now, that is kind of based on this mountain range here from this image. I like the movement of those mountains better than I like the movement of these ones. But what I like about this image is that overlap of the heel. Not only because we see where it overlaps the mountains into the body of water, but it's also a contrasting line. Whereas this was a little more rough and jagged, this is a little smoother and flowing. So I'm going to add a possible idea of a heel overlapping my mountain range. And I may even bring it over from the left to the right side, right to left side. Definitely larger than the one I was looking at for ideas. So looking at this, I have at least 2 layers in my background. I have my mountain range, I have this hillside. So I need at least 1 more layer. So I could try putting something a little bit closer to the bottom, but I'm starting to run out of room down here, and remember, I need at least a 4th layer that's going to read as foreground, something that's closest to me in my drawing of the landscape. So looking at my composition, I have some room up here that maybe I can add my 3rd layer to the background and push a land feature even further behind this mountain range and this hillside. So I'm going to try that out to see if I can come up with something I may like further back in the background. I like that, but I think I don't want it to just end here. Maybe that mountain range did continue over this way and disappears. So I'm liking my idea so far for my background and middle ground. So this would be sky. This is my furthest distance land feature. This one comes forward a little bit more, and this one definitely comes forward the most. So I think now I can start thinking about my foreground. And I want my foreground to at least be in about 2/3 of my landscape drawing. And I want it to touch along the bottom here. So I did kind of like the idea of this tree. So I'm going to consider placing a tree as part of my foreground. So I'm trying to decide where exactly I may want my tree to overlap all my other features. And I'm going to lightly sketch my tree over in this area. So again, this is just a rough draft. It's a rough sketch. I'm not sure the size of my tree, if it's going to be a certain kind of tree yet. The exact shape of it, how many branches it may have. I'm just going to play around with the idea that I may have a tree here in my composition. So looking at that, it's not too bad of a shape. Definitely needs work, but I'm getting more of an idea of what I want my layers of my drawing to look like. So again, this is a rough draft. I'm going to connect my tree to a ground. So that it connects to the bottom of my page. And I'm just going to lighten up some of my lines in here just so I get a better idea of what that may look like in total if I did have my tree placed in this area. So after looking at it and considering, I'm pretty happy with my initial rough draft of my composition. As I said, my tree does need a little bit more work. I'll have to consider possibly adding more branches to it, more branches to those branches, because as we know, trees definitely involve a lot of branches. And notice and remember that when you are sketching things out, make sure that you are making them light. Because if I didn't like my tree, instead of having to put together more sheets of paper, I could easily erase this because it is light enough and begin over with maybe a different object or a different style of tree. But that is your next process for your watercolor project. Off camera, I worked on my landscape rough draft a little bit more. As you can see now, I have darkened in a lot of my lines because I am fairly certain that this is the final look I would like for my landscape project. For your final rough draft, you need to take your 19 by 11 inch paper and create a rough draft of a landscape that involves 3 layers in your background and middle ground and 1 layer in the foreground. Your foreground layer, you want to have at least one object that is going to dominate the space of the foreground. You want something that is going to command the attention of the viewer in the foreground. So this is what I've done with my tree. I've made it tall. It overlaps all of my background and middle ground, and it takes up a nice amount of space in the foreground when I look at my composition left to right. When you have completed your rough draft with your 3 layers in the middle ground and background and your foreground layer with 1 dominating feature in your landscape, then you need to take a photo and submit it to your assignment.